Next we catch up with national and international events thanks to ITN and the early morning news.
Roll the camera. Check energy. Level okay. Get ready, everybody. And action.
Special guest, Fisher, with double action and charge level indicator. The perfect performer.
Here we are. The jolly old men at last, Jeeves. And there's a slipping spot.
I would not advocate it, sir.
Jeeves, don't talk such rot. Onwards.
Very well, sir.
Ah, the tang of the salt breezes, Jeeves.
Yes, sir.
The gentle heaving of the waves.
Exactly, sir.
Yo-ho-ho, Jeeves. In fact, I'll go further. Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of craft, sir. Oh, Jeeves. Nothing like a splash of light-chilled Croft Original dancing over the old taste buds. I feel absolutely in the pink, Jeeves.
I'm sure you're not alone, sir.
I say, Jeeves.
Croft Original, one instinctively knows when something is right.
It's Steve here. I'm one of the chatline monitors. I reckon our chatline is the greatest. So if you live in London, give me a call on 0077 00777.
If you live outside London, the number is 0898 400 444.
So I'll speak to you later, people.
Give him Old Spice for Christmas. The classic masculine fragrance. The mark of a man.
That marvellous American impressionist Rich Little regales us with Maid Marian, Friar Tuck, Little John, and in fact everyone else in Rich Little's Robin Hood. And that's early Boxing morning at 10 to 5. Now, it's Wednesday, 20th of December, 5 a.m, over to ITN for the morning news. You're watching Thames Television.
Romania closed to the world. Death toll could be 2,000. Good morning, it's 5 o'clock on Wednesday the 20th of December. This is ITN's Morning News. The headlines: there are unconfirmed reports that up to 2,000 people have been killed by security forces in the Romanian city of Timișoara since anti-government demonstrations began last weekend. Austrian television quoted a witness there as saying he had seen lorries carrying away cubic meters of bodies. Here at home, the government is expected to announce this afternoon it'll allow 225,000 Hong Kong citizens the right to settle in Britain. And the Queen reveals her Christmas message. She'll refer to the changes in Eastern Europe and the environment. Also in this morning's programme, the American industry that's getting worried over peace with the East, a report in our World News. And from American television, deaths after a passenger train ploughs into a truck at a level crossing. But now the main news, and first to Romania. There are the reports that 2,000 died in the Timișoara bloodbath have been quoted by the Yugoslav news agency Tanjug. They say their information has come from eyewitnesses in Romania.
Some of them say that in Timișoara, police are brutally fighting the demonstrators. And most of them were young people, and there were even, well, some dead children spot. And witness claimed that police are taking the arrested demonstrators to the central Timișoara square, where they beat them up and stab them with bayonets.
Romania stands like an impregnable fortress, with all of its four borders closed. No traffic, not even transit traffic, is being allowed through. Some of Budapest's inhabitants have their own eyewitness accounts of Timișoara. This man was there, on a mission to help persecuted Christian friends. He fled when the police charged, terrified for his life.
Student shouted, Jos Ceausescu, down Ceausescu, and away with dictatura.
He said then there were many policemen. They charged at the crowds. He panicked with his friends and fled. He feels certain many were killed in the gunfire. In Budapest, Romanian refugees prayed for family and friends unable to leave as they had done before the weekend shooting. It's now looking increasingly unlikely that any more Romanians will be able to flee across the border to safety in Budapest. The trains are all being searched, the planes have been stopped, and even the river traffic on the Danube has been halted.
The Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze has called the unrest in Romania regrettable. He met Mrs. Thatcher at Downing Street for 2 hours. Afterwards, Mr. Shevardnadze said there'd been a good measure of agreement between them. Britain's Foreign Office Minister, William Waldegrave, said the Romanian government should be overthrown.
I just have the feeling that this sandcastle will be swept away by the tide in due course, and it's simply a matter of how many Romanians have to suffer.
The government is likely to face a large backbench revolt today over its plans to allow up to 225,000 Hong Kong citizens into Britain after 1997. Details of the plan will be announced in the Commons by the Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd. He's decided full citizenship rights can be granted to 50,000 heads of families and their dependents, with 225,000 as the overall ceiling. Meanwhile, last night, a Labour attack on the forcible repatriation of Vietnamese boat people was defeated in the Commons. The government majority was 90, but at least 2 Tory MPs voted against and several abstained. American military transport planes have landed in Panama. Tension has increased between the United States and the Panamanian leader, General Noriega, following 2 shooting incidents involving American troops. The planes, C-130s, are said to come from the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division. Security is reported tight around Howard Air Force Base, where the planes have landed. On Monday, the Pentagon said that part of the 82nd Division was involved in so-called readiness exercises. Scotland Yard have confirmed they've arrested a man in connection with the shooting of boxing promoter Frank Warren. The man has been released on bail with orders to report to Plaistow Police Station in East London in 4 weeks' time. The RUC is this morning investigating claims that shampoo and shower gel on sale in shops across Northern Ireland have been contaminated by the Animal Liberation Front. Newspaper offices in Belfast were sent warning letters and samples, claiming the products had been spiked with paint stripper. British Rail says train fares will have to rise faster than inflation because of another cut in its subsidy from the government. Commuters into London, already facing a 9% rise in the new year, will have to meet all the running costs of Network South East within 3 years as government support vanishes altogether. And the already profitable intercity services have been told they must make bigger profits. The Queen has broken the tradition of secrecy surrounding her Christmas message by pre-recording the speech before a packed Albert Hall audience attending a Save the Children Fund event. She spoke of the new freedom in Eastern Europe and said it would be splendid to think that Christ's message of loving our neighbours as ourselves might at last be heeded. Well, there we take a break. Coming up next, the world news, which includes a special report on one group of American industrialists who aren't welcoming the events in Eastern Europe. Do stay with us.
No matter how life goes, with all its joys and woes, I never feel in a jam. I guess I'm just an amicable man. Yeah, got no worries financially. I got a pension policy. My future's in good hands. No wonder I'm an amicable man. Are you an amicable man?
A portrait of Doris Day, her 20 greatest hits. A great collection of memories from stylists.
He thinks you're wonderful. You're so special. He thinks you're lovely. You are lovely, aren't you? Aren't you? Aren't you?
Interflora, guaranteed to get to her.
Can really know how to make a great cup of coffee. casual coffee drinkers go out of their way for Kenco.
Welcome back. It's 8 minutes past 5, and that's time for the ITN World News. This edition was broadcast to audiences overseas last night.
Hello, I'm Christabel King with the ITN World News. We'll bring you the day's top international news and a business report. Among our stories, 2 German leaders take historic step closer to unity. Romania, reports of more bloody scenes of repression. And Philippines coup plotters issue death threat against Aquino. First, the 2 Germanys have agreed to negotiate a treaty which could pave the way to reunification. Officials also said East Germany was due to receive nearly $6 billion in credits from Bonn. Chancellor Helmut Kohl and Prime Minister Hans Modrow reached agreement during Herr Kohl's historic visit to Dresden. These Germans also said they would open a pedestrian crossing in the Berlin Wall at the site of the famous Brandenburg Gate. Chancellor Kohl received a rousing reception in Dresden from thousands of people waving flags and chanting, "Deutschland, Deutschland."
There were high expectations for this meeting, and the Dresden crowds, shouting "Germany, one fatherland," fueled an air of anticipation. Helmut Kohl's greeting carried the promise for Hans Modrow's government of economic aid and more, but at a price, and at first Modrow seemed to keep his distance. All day, West German flags outnumbered East German as the Dresden crowds mobbed Kohl, shouting for German unity. And the talks produced quick results. Both men had got on well. Kohl spoke of German self-determination and won a symbolic concession, the reopening of the Berlin Wall at the Brandenburg Gate. Before the ruins of Dresden's World War II destruction, Kohl paused to lay a wreath and ponder Germany's future. In a speech which paid respect to East German and wider European feelings, Kohl said, "My aim remains, if history allows it, the unity of our nation." He picked those words carefully, but no one in this vast crowd misjudged the moment. They were cheering the prospect of a united Germany. Ian Glover-James, ITN in Dresden.
But the Soviet Foreign Minister, Eduard Shevardnadze, has warned that there can be no German reunification unless the 2 countries can guarantee their neighbours' security. He told the European Parliament he endorsed each German state's right to self-determination, but added that a threat of war must never come again from German soil. Earlier, Mr. Shevardnadze made a historic visit to the headquarters of the NATO military alliance in Brussels.
Mr. Shevardnadze drove into NATO's festively decorated headquarters after receiving overnight reports from Moscow of the killings in Romania. For this historic first-ever visit by a Soviet minister to the headquarters of the Western Military Alliance, he was greeted by Secretary-General Manfred Wörner. The unprecedented talks with NATO Secretary-General were described as constructive and focused on the good prospects next year for big East-West arms cuts. From their meeting today came signs that the Soviets are increasingly worried that changes in Eastern Europe could get out of hand. Mr. Shevardnadze stressed the importance of both NATO and the Warsaw Pact in preserving stability in Europe. On events in Romania, Mr. Shevardnadze described the preliminary reports he'd received as unpleasant.
I can only say that if indeed some loss of life happened over there, I can only express my very, very profound regret.
Mr. Shevardnadze then headed for London and a meeting with Mrs. Thatcher, having taken one more step towards dismantling the barriers that have held East and West apart for 40 years. Jeffrey Archer, ITN, Brussels.
There are reports of further violence in Romania and more claims that hundreds of people were killed in the weekend crackdown. People inside Romania who've managed to phone friends in the West tell of hundreds dead, including children. They say some were shot, others crushed by tanks. Some reports say gunfire has again broken out in Timișoara, where the massacre is believed to have happened. The Romanian authorities' action has been internationally condemned. A British Foreign Office Minister, William Waldegrave, urged state employees to overthrow the Romanian government.
Today, as Romania sealed off its borders to the outside world, the scale of the weekend clashes was only beginning to filter out. These visiting Hungarians witnessed the beginning of the anti-government demonstrations. They fled when security forces moved in on the protesters, who responded in kind.
And people were throwing stones against the shop windows. Very many shop windows were broken.
These people waiting at a Bulgarian railway station had tried to cross to Romania, but were sent back, they say, in cattle wagons, several women claiming they were beaten and abused by Romanian border guards. In Romania, most of the disturbances have centred in the western city of Timisoara, but there are reports too of disturbances in Arad and Brasov. In Belgrade, a journalist who visited the border last night spoke to witnesses who'd been to one hospital.
They saw about 100 or more wounded, mainly young people, and a couple of dead. Among them, one woman. She was ran over by the tank. They saw the clashes between the demonstrators and the soldiers. All of them mentioned several hundred deaths.
The demonstrations in Romania were sparked off by the authorities' attempts to remove a Hungarian priest, Laszlo Turkish, from this church. Nearly 2 million ethnic Hungarians living in the province of Transylvania claim they're persecuted under the Romanian regime.
In Czechoslovakia, the Prime Minister Marian Kalfa has endorsed pro-democracy playwright Václav Havel for the presidency. The Federal Assembly in Prague was told by Prime Minister Kalfa that a successor to hardline President Husak should be elected before the new year. Thousands of students, also supporting Havel, picketed Parliament to demand that democratic change be continued. Amongst them, there was a small group celebrating the official abolition of the country's security police. The Jordanian Prime Minister, Murad Badran, has ended martial law after 22 years. He told the newly elected parliament in Oman that the law would soon be formally scrapped. Mr. Badran also promised tough new measures to fight corruption. The Philippines Defense Minister has called for tougher security around President Corazon Aquino after a death threat from the leaders of this month's failed coup. The government is still looking for the plotters, who told the American CBS News Network that Mrs. Aquino would be physically removed. They did not rule out assassination.
These are some of the most wanted men in the Philippines, leaders of the latest coup attempt, together for the first time since the end of the armed uprising. They spoke to CBS News from a safe house near Manila. They insist the insurrection is not over, just gone underground. Colonel Gregorio Hanasan once supported President Corazon Aquino. He has since led at least 3 coup attempts. He said the rebels will physically remove President Aquino from office if necessary, that she is finished.
Yes. Politically, historically, morally, and maybe physically. That's what we heard.
Off camera, one rebel told CBS News he would not rule out assassination. But the rebel group said it would prefer that Mrs. Aquino relinquish power willingly.
The demands are for Mrs. Aquino to step down as president, to immediately call for snap elections.
The rebels say they have nothing to lose, that they are committed to their cause. Since rebel troops stopped fighting 2 weeks ago, their leaders won't detail the size of their strength. The lack of information about them, they say, is their strength.
This regime does not know where we are, who we are, and how many we are.
Mrs. Aquino has reiterated that her government will hunt down and severely punish rebel leaders. Her military chiefs have vowed that another coup attempt will be no more successful than the first 6. For the past few days, they have been sending troops to rebel strongholds. Our interview was broken up by reports of government forces in the area.
The Chinese government says a secret visit to Beijing in July by U.S. National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft was made at the request of the Bush administration. The Chinese also say the trip has helped mutual understanding. However, the news has drawn fierce criticism in the West. The meetings in Beijing took place only a month after Chinese troops crushed the pro-democracy campaign in Tiananmen Square.
The announcement from the White House is sure to provoke a firestorm of criticism. A presidential spokesman confirming that just over a month after the massacre in Tiananmen Square, National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft had paid a secret visit to China. Faced with American outrage at the massacre and demonstrations, President Bush had announced a ban on all exchanges with the Chinese. And yet, at the same time, his top advisor was meeting in secret with the same leadership that had ordered the killings of pro-democracy students. President Bush is already under fire for a visit to China earlier this month by advisor Scowcroft and other top American officials. They were seen toasting the health of the Chinese leaders and apparently holding friendly talks with them. The White House say the secret visit in July was designed to tell the Chinese face-to-face that America deplored the massacres. Critics say the two visits only serve to undercut American and world criticism. They say that given the continuing repression in China, these apparently conciliatory moves by the United States are sending the wrong signal to the Chinese.
Security experts in the United States are investigating a series of postal bombs which have killed 2 people and seriously injured another. The attacks have been concentrated in the southern states. In the most recent incident, Robert Robinson, a black civil rights activist and lawyer, was killed when he opened a package in his office in Savannah, Georgia. 2 days ago, a judge was killed by a similar device. The FBI has warned lawyers, judges, and civil rights activists to be alert. A teenage boy who lost 3 members of his family in the Lockerbie air disaster has been talking about his life since the bombing of the Pan Am Jumbo last December. Stephen Flanagan had left home a few minutes before the jet crashed into the Scottish town, completely destroying his house.
Over the last 12 months, Stephen has bravely tried to build himself a new life with a new family. But the memories of that awful night when he lost his mother, his father and his sister cannot be held back when he returns to lay flowers at the family graveside. His only way to cope with it is to try to remember the good times they had together.
Christmas and the summer holidays and all went away. Everyone was together and had a good laugh. But every month or so, you know, bring some fresh flowers down and see what's happening. And it's just going to be all right, you know. It's going to keep going.
During the chaos of that night, Stephen found refuge with friends of his father, who run a small business in Lockerbie. It was a refuge he was never to leave. He's now become part of a family again.
When he just came on that night and has been ever since and blends in with the family. It wasn't something that you sat and actually decided on. It just happened that way.
Well, yeah, it did help knowing Bill and Kate beforehand, although I didn't know them very well. It didn't take long for us to get to know each other.
Just like part of the family. Well, he is part of the family now.
After losing his 10-year-old sister Joanne, Stephen now has his hands full coping with a boisterous 8-year-old brother.
You looks after me, don't you?
I know.
And if he doesn't look after me, I just nudge him.
As Thursday's painful anniversary approaches, Stephen now has a new family to give him the strength and support he'll need. David Chater, ITN, in Lockerbie.
Now business news. Poland has unexpectedly delayed signing a crucial agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Officials from the fund and the Solidarity-led government said they wanted more consultations before the deal could be signed. West Germany's second largest commercial bank, the Dresdner Bank, will open an office in Dresden. It's the East German city where the bank was founded more than a century ago. United States consumer prices rose by 0.4% in November, slightly faster than expected. However, economists say the rise is unlikely to stop America's central bank, the Federal Reserve, from lowering short-term interest rates soon. The European market prices on Tuesday evening. Gold bullion closed in London up $3.15 an ounce. North Sea Brent blend oil rose 30 cents a barrel. The FT 100 index in London closed down 16.4. On the Frankfurt Bourse, the DAX 30-share index rose 12.93. And now for our special report, in which we take a closer look at one of the issues in the news. The recent events in Eastern Europe have not been welcomed in every corner of the West. The huge American arms industry could be affected severely by improving East-West relations. The American Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, wants to cut spending by more than $150 billion by the mid-1990s. Some military advisors, including Robert McNamara, President Kennedy's defense secretary, are recommending cuts of up to 50%. Michael Crick reports from one center of the American arms industry, Fort Worth in Texas.
These are better than they've been in the past, and the reason is because we're stronger.
President John F. Kennedy at the height of the Cold War. His last speech in Fort Worth the day before he died.
So wherever the confrontation may occur, in Laos, Berlin, and Cuba, the products of Fort Worth and the men of Fort Worth provide us with a sense of security.
Few American cities have thrived from east-west tension since the war more than Fort Worth. Defense contracts bring the Dallas-Fort Worth area $7 or $8 billion a year and support more than 100,000 jobs. The vast caverns of the General Dynamics plant turn out F-16 fighter planes at the rate of 150 a year. Since production began in 1974, the F-16 has become the biggest program in Pentagon history, worth $45 billion, and it supports nearly 30,000 jobs. It's no surprise, then, that for General Dynamics workers, proclamations about the end of the Cold War seem premature. But already in recent years, Pentagon orders for the F-16 have been cut from 180 to 150, and many believe that production will inevitably suffer even more in the cuts that the administration is now considering. General Dynamics hope to sell more of their F-16s abroad, to NATO allies, Japan and the Middle East, and they argue that even without superpower conflict, this tactical fighter has a major role. But other Fort Worth programs are also looking to survive on smaller, localized skirmishes around the globe. Among them, the famous V-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft. The V-22 is a clever cross between a helicopter and a plane, with rotor blades that can be adjusted for it to fly either vertically or horizontally. The V-22 was among several ambitious programs developed by the Pentagon at the start of the Reagan defense build-up in the early 80s. The makers of the Osprey, Bell and Boeing, say that this aircraft can go twice as far and twice as fast as any helicopter of a comparable size. But the US Defense Secretary, Dick Cheney, has said he simply can't afford it. And he was saying that well before his announcement last month that he was considering significant cuts in the Pentagon budget. Despite Pentagon refusal to grant Osprey any more money, the makers hope congressional allies will still rescue the 2,000 Fort Worth jobs that are dependent on the project. Only a few miles away, the LTV company are contributing a large part of an even more controversial project, the B-2 stealth bomber. The Pentagon wants to buy 132 of the planes, designed to avoid enemy radar. But at $500 million each, it may prove too expensive to keep all LTV's 3,500 Fort Worth workers in employment. But rather than big-name companies and programs, smaller, unknown defense subcontractors may most be affected by the breaking out of peace. The Mayday Company makes small parts for aircraft manufacturers. 60% of their work was military a few years ago. Now they're concentrating on civil aircraft. Many Mayday parts are sold to Monesco, who in turn supply General Dynamics with landing gear. Monesco do have other civil customers and work for NASA's Space Shuttle, but most of their Fort Worth work is military. And despite the reduced Soviet threat, they believe their production lines will be kept going by the political maneuvering in Washington of local Texas politicians. Now the Fort Worth defense contractors that Wright and Tower kept working for 30 years will have to compete on a more equal footing against the numerous other defense communities across America who've thrived for so long and preparing for war. Michael Crick, ITN, Fort Worth, Texas.
And now a look at how some of Wednesday's papers are reporting the news. The Australian leads on the continuing turmoil in Alan Bond's media empire. The paper reports that millionaire businessman Mr. Robert Holmes Court has directly accused Bond Corporation of bugging his telephones. The Straits Times of Singapore says large parts of Romania were said to be under virtual martial law, and shooting was reported again in the western city of Timisoara. And the Asahi Symbol of Japan says the Japanese Foreign Ministry has expressed deep concern about the massacres carried out by Romanian security forces. And that's the world news. Goodbye.
And that was Christabel King. After the break, news from American television, including a report on a major train crash in California. Do join us in a couple of minutes.
Have you brought any presents yet?
Yeah, I think I've got everybody's except Paul's.
So, you had a good time then?
Yep, we had a great time.
Where's my present?
There's yours, Paul. Pint of Tetley?
I don't get this. Well, what's this then?
Which favourite TV programme, Paul?
Tetley bitter. You've got to hand it to him.
Because the true test of great hair is how well your hair behaves, Vidal Sassoon has created Salon Formula Shampoo.